I should have never taken the damn test. I wasn't even that interested in genealogy. It was just one of those stupid trends. Everyone was doing it and I figured, why not? A quick swab, a few weeks of waiting, and boom. A cute little report telling me I'm 40% Irish or whatever. Harmless, right? That's what I thought. But what I got back wasn't harmless. It was a family-destroying, reality-shattering, what the actual FK*** kind of result. And the worst part? I wasn't the only one who saw it. Started as a joke. My sister, Emily, 24F, got me, 27M, a DNA kit for my birthday. She had taken one a few months earlier and was obsessed with it. You should do it too, she said. It'd be fun to see how similar our results are. So I did. Spit in a tube, sent it off, didn't think about it. Until 3 weeks later. I was at work when I got the email. Your DNA results are ready. I clicked on it, half distracted, expecting to see some mix of European countries and nothing surprising. But one thing stood out immediately. Sibling match. No full siblings detected. I blinked. What? I scrolled down, scanning the page, my heart pounding faster with every word. It showed Emily as a half-sibling. Same with my younger brother, Matt, 22M. I felt my stomach drop. That wasn't possible. We had the same parents. We grew up together. There was no divorce, no family drama. Our parents had been together for over 30 years. There was no reason why we wouldn't be full siblings. Unless. I swallowed hard, my mind racing through every possibility. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe Emily's test had been wrong. Or maybe one of us had a different father. I sat there, staring at the screen, my hands shaking. And that's when my phone buzzed. Emily. WTF? She had seen it too. And just like that, our family would never be the same again. Emily called me 2 seconds later. Are you seeing this? She blurted, skipping any kind of greeting. I stared at my screen, my mouth dry. Yeah. She let out a sharp breath. This has to be a mistake, right? Like a lab error. I wanted to agree. Wanted to brush it off and say, yeah, totally, no way this is real. But the thing is, DNA doesn't lie. And the way my stomach was twisting, I already knew. This wasn't a mistake. I forced myself to sound calm. Have you checked Matt's results? She was quiet for a second. Then I heard furious typing. A moment later, she swore under her breath. I didn't even have to ask. Half-sibling, she whispered. A cold shiver ran through me. It wasn't a mix-up. It was real. Emily was still scrambling for answers. Maybe Dad isn't our biological dad, she said quickly. Or maybe Mom had an affair. Or maybe we're all from different dads. She let out a half-laugh, but it was forced and shaky. I swallowed hard. There's only one way to know for sure. Silence. We both knew what I meant. Mom and Dad had to take the test. But how the hell do you bring that up? Hey guys. Funny thing. We spat in a tube for fun and found out one of you has been lying to us for 3 decades. Mind taking a test real quick? Emily groaned. This is gonna ***king destroy them. I hesitated. Or maybe just Dad. She went quiet. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head. Because deep down, she was thinking it too. If one of us didn't match, then that meant Mom had a secret. And if that was true, then this wasn't just some random DNA result. This was a bomb waiting to go off. Neither of us wanted to be the one to bring it up. How do you even start that conversation? Hey, Mom and Dad, funny story. We took a DNA test, and now we don't know who we are. So we stalled. For 3 days. But the longer we waited, the worse it got. Emily was spiraling, texting me at random hours with theories. Matt had no clue yet, and I felt sick every time I saw our parents, knowing that one of them was hiding something. I was about to lose my mind when Emily finally cracked. I can't take it anymore, she said. We have to talk to Mom. I frowned. Why Mom? She hesitated. I just have a feeling. I knew what she meant. If Dad had a secret kid out there, he wouldn't have raised them as his own. But Mom, she could have had an affair. And if she did, she took that secret to the grave, until we spat in a tube and ruined everything. So that night, Emily and I sat Mom down at the kitchen table. She was confused at first. What's this about? Emily glanced at me. I swallowed hard, then said, "We took DNA tests." Mom froze. It was the smallest reaction. Just a tiny pause before she reached for her glass of water. But I caught it. And so did Emily. "That's nice," Mom said carefully. "Did you learn anything interesting?" Emily didn't blink. "Yeah. We learned we're not full siblings." Mom's fingers tightened around the glass. "Barely. But enough." I felt my heart start to pound. Emily pressed forward. "Wanna explain that?" Mom set her glass down and exhaled slowly. "You need to understand," she started. That was all I needed to hear. I shot up from my chair. "Oh my God. It's true." Mom's eyes widened. "Sit down." Emily's voice was sharp. "Who is it?" Mom's throat bobbed. "I." "Who isn't Dad's kid?" I demanded. She flinched. And then, in a barely audible whisper, she said, "You." The world tilted. Everything around me, the kitchen, the table, the walls, blurred into the background. I felt Emily looking at me. I felt the air leave my lungs. I wasn't Dad's son. I wasn't his. I had spent 27 years calling him my father. And now I don't know who the FK I am. What the hell do I do now? I don't remember much after that. I know Emily was saying something. I know my mom was trying to explain. But I couldn't hear any of it over the roaring in my head. I wasn't Dad's son. I wasn't his. The man who raised me, who taught me how to ride a bike, who was there for every important moment of my life, wasn't my father. And worst of all, he didn't know. Because if he did, there's no way in hell he would have let me find out like this. I finally forced myself to look at my mom. She looked small, like she had shrunk into herself. Like she knew that no matter what she said, she had already lost me. I swallowed hard. "Who is he?" Mom closed her eyes. "It was a long time ago." I slammed my hand on the table. "Who is he?" She flinched. Emily was silent, watching. Then, in a voice so soft I almost missed it, she said a name. And my blood ran cold. Because I knew that name. I had heard it before, at family gatherings. I had shaken his hand. I had called him Uncle. Because my biological father was my dad's best friend. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back. To tell me I misheard her. That this was all just some sick misunderstanding. But she didn't. She just sat there, staring at the table, too much of a coward to even look at me. Emily was the first to break the silence. "You're joking," she whispered. Mom slowly shook her head. And just like that, I felt something inside me snap. I pushed my chair back so hard it screeched against the floor. "Are you ****king kidding me?" My voice came out too loud, too sharp, but I didn't care. Mom flinched. "Please, let me explain." "There's nothing to explain," I cut her off. "You cheated on Dad. With his best friend. And then what? You just had me and pretended nothing happened." Tears welled up in her eyes. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like, Mom?" My voice dripped with venom. "Was it some long, tragic love story? Were you just so in love with him that you had to betray the one person who trusted you the most?" She shook her head furiously. "It wasn't love. It was a mistake." I let out a sharp, humorless laugh. "Oh, a mistake. So what? I was just some oops baby." She winced but didn't deny it. Emily sat frozen, like she didn't even know how to process this. I didn't blame her. Our entire family just got nuked. I paced the kitchen, my thoughts racing. Does Dad know? Mom's face paled. That told me everything I needed to know. "Oh my God," I muttered, raking a hand through my hair. "You never told him." She wiped her eyes. "I didn't want to hurt him." I stared at her, disgusted. "You didn't want to hurt him? Are you serious?" I gestured wildly. "You had no problem screwing his best friend, but telling the truth was too much?" She sobbed. I was scared. I clenched my fists, trying to hold in the rage boiling inside me. "You don't get to play the victim," I snapped. "You've had 27 years to fix this. Instead, you let Dad raise me like I was his, knowing damn well I wasn't." She shook her head. "You don't understand." I slammed my fist against the table. "Then make me understand." She sucked in a shaky breath. "It happened once. Just once. I never wanted it. I never planned it. But then I found out I was pregnant, and I couldn't destroy our family. So you lied instead. She didn't deny it. I felt sick. I had spent my whole life thinking I was part of this happy, stable family, when in reality, I was the product of the worst betrayal imaginable. And now I had to live with that. Emily finally spoke, her voice small. Does he know? I turned to Mom, waiting for an answer. She looked down, ashamed. No, she admitted. He thinks you're his. I swallowed hard. And Uncle Dave? Her eyes flickered with something unreadable. He knows. Everything in me froze. Excuse me. My voice was dangerously calm. Mom's chin trembled. He's always known. I told him when I found out. But he agreed. He agreed it would be best to let your father believe you were his. I thought I had been angry before. That was nothing compared to what I felt now. So Dad was the only one who didn't know. His best friend knew. His wife knew. Hell, even I knew now. But the one person who deserved the truth had been kept in the dark for nearly 3 decades. I felt a new kind of rage bubbling inside me. Not just anger, but disgust. I turned on my heel and grabbed my keys. Mom panicked. Where are you going? I didn't even look at her. Where do you think? She jumped up. No, please. Don't do this. I whirled around. You don't get to tell me what to do. Not anymore. Her face crumpled. If you tell him, it'll destroy him. I laughed bitterly. Good. Because he deserves the truth. And with that, I walked out the door. The drive to my dad's house felt surreal. My hands were gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles were white. My brain was on fire, replaying everything my mom had just admitted. She cheated. She had me. She never told him. But his best friend knew the whole time. I pulled into the driveway and just sat there for a second, staring at the house I had grown up in. It didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. I stepped out of the car, marched to the front door, and knocked hard. A few seconds later, Dad opened the door, looking confused. Hey, kiddo. What's up? My stomach twisted. He had no idea. I swallowed down the lump in my throat. Can we talk? His expression changed. Yeah, of course. He stepped aside, letting me in. I walked into the living room, the same damn room where we had celebrated Christmas, birthdays, all these happy family moments that were now a f***ing joke. Asterisk asterisk. He sat down on the couch and gestured for me to do the same. I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I just stood there, staring at him. I had spent my whole life thinking I looked like him. I don't. I had his mannerisms, his sense of humor. But his face, his features, none of it was mine. He frowned. You okay? You're acting weird. I took a deep breath. Dad. My voice cracked. I need to tell you something. And it's bad. His whole body tensed. All right. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I had been so sure I was ready for this, but now that I was standing here, looking him in the eyes, about to tear his entire world apart, I hesitated. I almost walked out. But then I thought about him sitting across from Uncle Dave at every family barbecue, laughing, drinking beer, calling him his brother, trusting him. And I knew I had to say it. I owed him that much. I clenched my fists. I took a DNA test. He blinked. Okay. I forced myself to look at him. Really look at him. I took a shaky breath. You're not my father. His face didn't register it at first. Like I had spoken in another language. Then, slowly, the confusion melted into something else. Something raw. Something horrified. I pressed on before I lost my nerve. Mom had an affair. You were never supposed to find out, but I took the test, and my biological father isn't you. Dad's hands curled into fists on his knees. Who? His voice was barely above a whisper. I felt my stomach churn. I almost spared him. Almost. But I couldn't. I squared my shoulders. Uncle Dave. Silence. Dead. Fking. Silence. Asterisk asterisk. Dad stopped breathing. His whole body went still, like he had just been turned to stone. Then suddenly, he let out a sharp, humorless laugh. A broken sound. You're joking. I didn't say anything. His breathing picked up. He shook his head. Violently. No. No, that's not possible. I could see it happening in real time. his entire world caving in on itself. I felt a sting in my eyes, but I didn't cry. I couldn't. Not when he was about to lose everything. He buried his face in his hands, gripping his hair. No, no, no. I stepped closer. Dad. He shot up so fast I took a step back. His breathing was ragged. His hands were shaking. He looked around the room, like he didn't even recognize his own house anymore. Then, suddenly, his expression changed. It hardened. And when he looked at me, his voice was cold. Where is she? My stomach dropped. Dad. Where is she? I swallowed hard. She's at Grandma's. He nodded, jaw tight. Then, without another word, he grabbed his keys and stormed out the door. I stood there, completely frozen, because for the first time I realized this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about revenge. My dad just left to confront her, and I don't think he's coming back the same. I barely had time to react before my dad's car peeled out of the driveway. I stood there, my heart pounding, watching his taillights disappear down the street. This wasn't just anger. I had seen my dad mad before, when Matt crashed his first car, when Emily almost got arrested in college, when I failed an entire semester without telling him. But this was different. This was years of betrayal hitting him all at once. And he was about to walk into my grandmother's house and explode. I needed to stop him. I scrambled for my keys and practically sprinted to my car, fumbling to start the engine. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped them twice. By the time I pulled up to Grandma's house, his car was already in the driveway. The front door was wide open. I jumped out and ran inside. And what I saw? Chaos. My mom was crying, her face streaked with tears. Grandma was standing near the couch, hands covering her mouth in shock. My dad stood in the center of the room, breathing like a bull about to charge. But what terrified me the most? Uncle Dave was there, and Dad was staring straight at him. Mom saw me first. "Tell him to stop," she pleaded, her voice raw. "Please." But it was already too late. Dad lunged. I barely had time to process before he grabbed Dave by the collar and slammed him against the wall. "You son of a b*****," he snarled. Dave held up his hands. "Greg." Dad shoved him harder. "You knew." His voice cracked, but his grip didn't loosen. King knew, and you let me raise him like he was mine." Mom screamed. "Stop." Dad ignored her. His knuckles turned white as he pinned Dave against the wall. "You smiled in my face for 27 years. You sat at my table. You played with my kids. And the whole time, you knew you were King my wife." Dave looked genuinely terrified. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. Because what could he say? There was nothing that could fix this. Dad pulled back his fist. "No!" I shouted, but I was too late. His punch landed hard. A sickening crack echoed through the house as Dave's head snapped sideways. He staggered, nearly falling to the floor. Blood trickled from his nose. Grandma gasped. "Greg, stop this." But he wasn't done. He grabbed Dave again, pulling him up, ready to swing again. I acted on instinct. I ran forward and grabbed my dad's arm. "Stop!" I yelled, desperate now. He fought against me for a second, but I held firm. "Dad, don't do this." His whole body shook with rage. Dave wiped the blood from his mouth, his hands trembling. And then, in the most pathetic broken voice I'd ever heard, he whispered, "I'm sorry." That was the worst part, because I think he actually meant it. But sorry wasn't enough. Not now. Not ever. Dad let out a ragged breath, his chest heaving. He finally let go of Dave's shirt and took a shaky step back. Then, in a voice that sent chills down my spine, he muttered, "You're dead to me." He turned to my mother next. She was still sobbing, hands clasped together like she was praying for mercy. But he didn't yell, didn't scream. He just looked at her like she was a stranger. And then, without another word, he walked out. I drove home in silence. Dad was in the car ahead of me, but I wasn't sure if he even realized I was following him. His knuckles were tight on the wheel, his whole body stiff. I had never seen him like that before. Not just angry, not just hurt, empty. By the time we pulled into the driveway, I wasn't sure what to expect. Would he talk? Would he scream? Would he act like I wasn't even there? He walked inside without a word. I followed, shutting the door behind me. He stood in the middle of the living room, staring at nothing. His breathing was heavy, like he was trying to hold himself together with sheer force. Then he sat down, rubbing his hands over his face. I hesitated before stepping closer. "Dad!" He didn't answer at first. Just sat there, shaking his head. Finally, in a voice that was barely above a whisper, he muttered, "What am I supposed to do now?" I swallowed hard. "I don't know." He let out a hollow laugh. "Yeah, me neither." Silence. I sat down across from him. I wanted to say something, anything, but what do you even say in a moment like this? He looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. "Did you know?" I tensed. "What?" "Before the test." His voice was flat. "Did you ever suspect?" I shook my head immediately. "Never." He let out a breath, nodding slowly. "Good." Another silence stretched between us. Then, after a long pause, he whispered, "I wish I never knew." That hit me like a punch to the gut. I leaned forward, resting my arms on my knees. "I'm sorry." His eyes flickered to me, and for a second, I saw something break through the emptiness. "You have nothing to be sorry for," he said. I didn't believe that. Not entirely. Because I had been the one to open this door. I had been the one who sent in that test, who pushed for answers, who shattered the fragile lie he had been living in for nearly 3 decades. But deep down, I knew the truth. If it wasn't me, it would have been someone else. This was never going to stay buried forever. I exhaled. What happens now? Dad rubbed his temples. I don't know. And for the first time in my life, I realized he wasn't the strong, invincible man I always thought he was. He was just a guy whose whole world had been destroyed. And I had no idea how to help him put it back together. The next morning, Dad was gone. For a split second, I panicked. I thought about what Mom had said, that if he ever found out, it would destroy him, that he might do something stupid. But then I saw his note on the kitchen counter. Needed some space. Be back later. I let out a shaky breath, but it didn't calm me, because even though he was physically somewhere, I knew the man who had existed yesterday was gone. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if he was ever coming back. I sat down at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. There were dozens of missed calls and texts from Mom. A few from Emily. I ignored them all. Instead, I did something insane. I called Uncle Dave. The phone rang a few times before he picked up. His voice was rough, like he hadn't slept. "Hello." I swallowed the bile in my throat. "It's me." Silence. Then cautiously he asked, "How's your dad?" I almost laughed. Like he cared. "He's gone," I said flatly. "Needed space." Dave exhaled. F***K. I clenched my jaw. "Did you ever even feel guilty?" His breath hitched. "Of course I did." I scoffed. "Then why didn't you tell him?" Another pause. Then, in a voice so weak I almost didn't recognize it, he said, "I was a coward. No excuses. No justifications. Just the truth." I hated that it almost made me believe him. I ran a hand down my face, exhausted. "What am I supposed to do now?" Dave sighed. "I don't know, kid. But, for what it's worth, I'm sorry." I clenched my teeth. "Yeah. Well, sorry doesn't fix **T. And then I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone, waiting for him to call back. He didn't. And honestly, that was the first good decision he had ever made. Dad came back 2 days later. He didn't say where he went. Didn't offer any explanation. He just walked into the house, set his keys on the counter, and said, "I want a divorce." No hesitation. No emotion. Like the man he used to be had died somewhere in those 2 days, and this was the only version of him left. Mom broke down crying, begging, pleading, but he didn't care. "I spent 27 years loving a lie," he told her, his voice hollow. "I won't waste another second." And that was that. A week later, he packed a bag and moved out. Mom was a wreck. Emily kept bouncing between anger and guilt. And me. I just felt empty. Because I didn't just lose the illusion of my family. I lost my dad. He still talks to me. He still says he loves me. But something's different. Like he looks at me and sees the worst moment of his life. Like I'm a reminder of the one person who ruined him. And as much as I tell myself it's not my fault, I think part of him blames me anyway. And maybe I blame myself, too. The divorce is happening. Dad barely talks to Mom. Uncle Dave is out of the picture completely. I don't know how to fix this. Maybe I never will. But I do know one thing. I should have never taken that f***ing test. Asterisk asterisk. That's it for today's story. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more wild Reddit stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep the stories coming.